Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Chess Steps, this new series that I've been putting out. This is episode number 2, and I'm playing against subscribers in this episode with the ratings of 617 up until 995, so basically about 1,000. And just like in episode 1, they are 5-minute and 5-second bonus games. Obviously, you on your own can practice with 10 or 15-minute. And in every episode, we're basically just kind of slowly adding on layers that you are going to learn and try to implement as you go up the rating ladder, whatever your current rating is. And honestly, some of these games have been so high level that even if you exceed the highest bound by like 100 or 200 points, you could still learn a lot, honestly. It really, really feels that way. So I'm actually sitting here and recording this immediately after episode 1. So if you're watching this way in the future, I recorded them separately. I was going to just do one giant episode, but the first one was just simply too long. So everything you've learned from the first one still applies. We're going to be putting a pawn in the center of the board. And for the first game, we were playing Cap Hideside, who plays an opening against us that we just played at the end of episode 1. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's a playlist, so you can go check it out. But the Queen's Gambit. And we accepted that gambit. We had the gambit accepted against us. And it didn't turn out to be good because we surrendered the entire center. Now, the Queen's Gambit accepted is very reasonable, but you should try to solidify your center. And there's two ways to do that. Pawn or pawn. Both have certain drawbacks. They get in the way of certain pieces. In general, though, declining the Queen's Gambit with the e-pawn is the way to go. The Queen's Gambit is very, very good. And the point is that actually now black is already taking up a bit of a defensive stance. In general, e6, d5 against the Queen's pawn with black, very good system. We are pinned, so we can develop our bishop. And I have talked about the fact that the knight in front of the c-pawn and queen's pawn position is actually not that great. So what we want to do in the future is maybe get c5 and then knight c6. But for the meantime, we're under some pressure here. So I'm blocking this pin. I'm going to get us castled. And then before we actually go to war, now we're going to start figuring some things out. So again, we have this tension here. We're not taking off center. c5 is an interesting move. One thing you can do in queen's pawn positions is you can not develop your bishop passively, as I did in the first game we had with black in episode 1, but is to play b6 and bishop b7. Fianchetto is what that's called, when you move your b or g pawns up a square and then hide the bishop behind it. So our bishop will go over here and have this diagonal. Okay, opponent takes. So they got tired of the tension. We can take with the pawn or the knight. Now, the knight would invite a lot of trades. The pawn is also very stable and good. I'm going to take with the knight just to kind of, just for fun. We're going to have knights seeing each other. We have bishops seeing each other. Opponent could get confused here, do some crazy thing. Okay, they decide to take like that. By the way, here you can take with the queen or the knight. So your knight could go like a boomerang. But I'm going to take with the queen because that's the easy move. Now, if they take our knight, we take with the pawn. So nothing special. My neck has been bothering me today. I slept weird. You ever do that? You ever sleep weird on your neck? Oh, God. It's been like, I've been rolling my neck around for like 6 hours since I woke up. Bishop d3. Okay, so now we have a situation where we can take. We don't have to. I'm going to, just because it's a thing that 600s might do. Lower rated players tend to they just take everything they can. So for example, here I can like wander all the way down and attack this pawn. It's a completely ridiculous move. And it can very easily be parried. So you really don't need to play moves like queen a3. I think we should finish our kind of development plan of putting the bishop out on this, let's call it a long diagonal, potentially. And my opponent also has control of a long diagonal. If you remember one of the first games we played against Yoga Dad in episode 1, we had the same situation where a bishop was pointing down to our king. And also the game that we played, the first game we played with black, we had a similar situation. So we were under a little bit of pressure. Now we have kind of a KG setup, so we're all on the 6th rank. We're not on the 7th rank. We're on the 5th rank, sorry, at all. We don't have any pawns coming up. So we can prepare for that. In general, I would say that there's no point putting a bishop on a long diagonal and then blocking it. So be patient. Put your knight down here and maybe transfer it slowly into the middle. Your bishop is just so strong, it'd be a shame to block it for no apparent reason. And pawn breaks. Back to this concept. The queen's pawn games are generally very solid. So I'm not recommending you any gambits yet. As we move up the ratings, there obviously are more gambit style things like tricky, you know, you can try to win in 8 moves type of thing, but not in this series. I'm trying to get you kind of playing the way you're supposed to. Knight e5. Okay. Knight e5 is the beginning of some transformations. If you watched, I keep referring back to episode 1, but in episode 1, in one of the earliest moments, I played knight to e5. Knight e5 is a bad trade. It's a bad trade because, not because of material, but because of pawn structure. So, as a 600, that's not really the first thing that's crossing your mind. But you see what we've done to the pawns? We've ruined them. The pawns like this stood all well together. Yes, you can argue this pawn's a bit weak. Absolutely. But it's supporting the center. Queen can always protect it. Rook can protect it. But now you've doubled your own e-pawns. And here black has a very strong move. It's queen g5. Attacking with our long-range piece and attacking the pawn in the middle of the board. We also can immediately go and pressure the pawns. Like, we have moves that just attack both pawns right away. We didn't have. We couldn't even go queen c5. The pawn used to go here. This is a great move. I'm going to play it because as a 600, you need to be thinking about how you can be coordinating pieces together on a jackpot like this. So maybe my opponent moved the knight with the intention of moving the queen and doing the same to me. That might have been it. That might have been the point. The problem is that you're not guaranteed to do that, right? Like, if I give you 2 more moves, sure. But the difference with my move, it's not a hope move. I don't care about mate. If you stop mate, I get your pawn. So I don't care about checkmating. I mean, I do. But if you stop it, I don't care. Because I'm going to get e5, right? So, good. So they stopped it. I'm pawn up now. And I'm attacking a second one. So this is good. We've taken advantage of the inaccurate exchange by my opponent. Instead of knight to e5 in that position, my opponent probably should have just slow played. You can't do anything immediately here. It's a slow game. Take some pawn space. Advance a little bit. Maybe connect your rooks. Try to take an open file. If you can't play with your pieces, like knights, bishops, queens, they can't do much yet. You got to play with your pawns, right? So here we have a situation. We're under attack. On the one hand, I can threaten a mate, but this is check. So I'm not going to mate my opponent, right? So you can interpose, which we learned in episode 1, or you can play h6 like that. And there you go. That's it. And I'm going to launch the new series on YouTube. Literally, as I'm recording this episode, I'm launching episode 1. Isn't that cool? Hardworking businessman. Thank you for your support. Rook e1. Okay. No threat. Again, I can threaten a mate. They're going to block. So at this point and throughout this episode, we're going to have to just see stuff like that. Like, they're going to block. They're not just going to let you mate them, right? So what do? I mean, you can advance a pawn. You can play many moves here that don't weaken a whole... Like, don't push a pawn in front of your king. There's no need to do that. Rook on the open file. You know, when in doubt, let's bring this rook into the game. And now we actually have a very serious threat, believe it or not. This is not the same situation. If we go queen d5, which threatens mate, we also use the rook as backup to hit the bishop. I didn't even play rook d8. I'm not going to lie to you. I did not play this with this in mind. But it's a nice byproduct. Our queen teams up on a straightaway and a diagonal with the bishop and the rook. That is very nice. And that move kind of forces me into it, you know? Because it's attacking my queen. So now, this is not mate, by the way. Because this queen covers. That's what... Notice, the door opened for the queen. However, we can still go all the way down. And then we can force the king into checkmate. We can go all the way down. Sometimes people have a blind spot for this. They forget that you can go to the opposite side. You only want to get in front of the king. Right? You only want to... It's not just about getting in front of the king. It's also about... And now we see e4, and the queen takes the bishop. So that was nice. That rook move just changed the whole game. Bringing that rook to the open file is so useful. Right, rook takes. And now mate is not the most important thing. Please don't go here. A lot of lower rated players doing this. I don't know why they... Yeah, so at this point, what I would do is I would bring my second rook, because why not, right? You want the rooks together. But it's also perfectly reasonable to just, well, Gotham taught me to eat the pawns, right? When I'm up, so fine, eat the pawns. Eat the pawns. Right. Now we can take this one or this one. Very nice. Ah, be very careful. So my opponent, even though they doubled my pawns, did open up an attack. Now, luckily, I can take the pawn. I can go here and I can go like this. And by the way, now, the magic of chess. You attack me, I attack you. I gotta be very careful here. One thing I haven't talked about too much yet is time management, because I'm trying to be, you know, slow and steady, walk you through everything that's under attack. I can push it. I can also defend it while not forgetting about my bishop. So I can just push my pawn. My rook guards everything. We also, luckily, have this getaway on the back rank. Yeah, one thing I haven't talked about too much is about time management. I'm trying to be instructional, and that is, the price is that I have to be a bit slower. But obviously, as we keep playing, I will try to speed it up a little bit. Now, I would like a rook trade. I can force a rook trade with a check. Obviously, as I've talked about many, many times already, like, that is like the easiest way to just win a game. At this point, though, as well, because the pawns are in front of the king, you'll notice the king's got a lot of weaknesses, a lot of open space around it. So we could go down there with the rooks. So we could just bully the king here on the second rank with our bishop, and probably checkmate as well. Imagine a situation where the rook ends up in the corner instead of the queen. So this bishop is just priceless for us. Furthermore, if we tie the bishop into the e4 square, like we, for example, just so you understand, this is called an outpost. So a square, usually in your opponent's territory, that you cannot be kicked out of. And that generally means they cannot attack it with an equal or lesser piece. For example, if a pawn could kick us out here, we wouldn't be here. The rook can't, because it's worth less. And there's no knight or bishop. So because this bishop can be glued in like this, that is a very powerful outpost square, which will survive the entirety of the game. Now, I've talked about simplifying with rook d1. That is probably still the easiest thing to do here, and I just will do that. But this bishop is so strong, right? And now moves like c3. Oh, that was mate. I missed mate in one. I just... Oh, I missed mate. Oh my god, my subscribers are going to make fun of me. Rook h1. Yeah, I was just so focused. Okay, I'm going to miss mate. I might as well be dedicated to the cause of missing mate in one. And I look crazy. I just said it out loud. I just said rook h1. It's because in my mind, I had prepared myself mentally for king f2. I just prepared myself for this move, and I just didn't think about king h2. But it's funny. But you see the bishop guards the pawn, yeah? And so the opponent resigns. This is probably a fair position to resign in, but again, I wouldn't resign at this level. They just know they're playing me, so they're probably confident I would checkmate them. But rook h1 is mate. There you go. So yeah, Queen's Gambit. We've seen it now with white and with black. Very nice that we actually got a chance to see it on the other side. I think my opponent's 1120 rapid. So this is like not a bad player at all. I mean, this is not a 600. Oh. A lot of people have much higher rapid ratings. So we kind of just were normal here, and we could have played with the c-pawn. Perfectly reasonable. I'm trying not to take off center and surrender the center. So I played what I played. And then pawn takes, we could take with the pawn or the knight. You know, bishop takes, and we had some trades. And did I have to trade there? Not necessarily. Could have just finished my development. But look, folks, as long as you're not... There's a difference between that trade, which is borderline equal, and this trade. Knight to e5 is a very bad move by white. At this point, the position is totally balanced, and we would have had to, you know, bring the rooks, find a pawn break, but just one bad pawn structure decision, splitting your pawns and doubling them, it changed the whole course of the game, because now I could make easy threats, right? I could play queen g5 and things of that nature. And from there it was, it's this kind of constant thought of improvement, and at the same, improving the position, and at the same time just analyzing if our opponent is threatening us. So I've played d4 several times. I'm going to play e4 again, and we're going to see what happens. At this point, 770 and now 900 and things like that, 800, 900 folks are going to be playing more solid openings. So we have, again, we're going to follow our philosophy of taking the center. And my opponent's playing probably a French defense. Yeah, so e6, d5. This is known as the French defense. So in one of our first games, I just took. So you can take. You can also defend your pawn with the knight, and you can also push. And it all kind of leads to different stuff. I'm gonna take. And so we have an opening known as the Exchange French. So this is the philosophy that I followed in game one. Queen takes. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, we can immediately attack the queen, which a lot of people would be tempted to do. Pawn is decent, right? Because D and C pawns, best friends. If you have a D pawn out, sometimes a C pawn out would also be quite nice. We can also attack it with our knight. So I'm going to play the natural move, which is obviously just attacking the queen with the knight. Duh. Right? Now, I did break my policy of C pawn is the D pawn's best friend because I was so distracted I can attack the queen. Oh my god. That's what happens. That's what sometimes happens. But the danger of wasting time in the opening like this is okay, knight c6. Danger of wasting time is you just let white develop faster. Now, basically, any bishop move is fine. Even this one, because they can't take. Sometimes you have blind spots for this at the lower levels. You just forget this is protected. Also, if you, the final game of episode 1, I had a move like d5, and I couldn't be taken. In this case, d5 is not good, because I can just get taken. I'm going to put a bishop in the center of the board. And because my opponent played a bit strange in the opening, they cannot move their light-scored bishop out, so it's blocked. It's not the worst thing, but it's not the worst thing, but it's could be better. It could be better. So knight f6, I'm gonna castle. That's basically been the strategy throughout all these games. Everyone's sort of playing in the middle, and I'm doing the same. I am not reinventing the wheel. Bishop d6, yeah, again, like bishop g5, these pins are quite useful. Bishop e3. So it's a perfect example of just an open game, right? We've traded a center pawn. I mean, my position is a bit more open. I have a bit more space. I'm going to start talking about space as well, which is the concept of how many squares you fight for on your opponent's side. I obviously have more space because I've developed 4 pieces. This bishop's not in the game. I have a pawn threatening to move forward. And now is like one of these moments, yeah? So what's next? What's next? Well, simple improving moves that do nothing. H3, A3. Rook E1 does something. It grants us even more space. Like, we fight for more squares now. Rook E1 is a move you play instantly. Now, what if we want to, like, do something about this pin? Knight E4. If they take me, I take their queen. The problem with Knight E4, which I'll play it, is that there's just bishop back. And one movers at this level, they're not great. Like, 94 might work. I don't know. They might do something completely nuts. We're also threatening here to take and open up the king, which we saw also in episode 1. Now, if you're just watching episode 2 because you're like, I don't want to watch 0 to 500, you're lost. But we had a very similar situation. But as long as a pin can be blocked, like we saw in game 1 of this episode, like bishop e7, and we don't have anything because the bishop and the queen together totally solve the problems there. Knight e4 is not a great move. Rook e1 or breaking in the middle with d5 or... this is a very common blunder. So now this is going to be a mini tactic. The opponent probably calculated bishop takes, pawn takes, right? And they're like, oh, I'm going to have 2 bishops. I kind of like that. And maybe they're not worried about the opening of their king. But danger levels. How do we deal with a threat on our bishop? We move it. We protect it. In this case, protecting it is stupid because that's a pawn. What's worth more than a bishop? The king. What if we take with the knight? And now that pawn cannot protect both things. This one, I've not been playing these like knockout tactics, but this one I'm gonna play. This is a very common thing. People will forget you can take, and if the pawn has to take, that pawn no longer is gonna be able to have a protector. So this is a super common tactical motif. I'm gonna play it because I am. And now bishop takes h6. And now the rook is going to have to move. So the black probably will have to move the rook. And the way you justify all this is you somehow get the queen, because now you have to start thinking about, oh, mate, right? That's the first thing that has to cross your mind. Checkmate, open king. But it's not so simple. How do we get the queen over here? I mean, you can't just go boop and boop. You're gonna get taken, right? You can't even go boop boop because you're gonna get taken. So what do? You move your knight? Okay, sure. We can play knight h4 and queen g4. Huh? Knight h4. We also can play a very flashy move, knight e5, and say, oh no, my knight, you know? Knight e5 is a very flashy move. Knight h4 is also very flashy. Knight g5 is idiotic because we not only lose our knight, we also block the king. So knight e5 is, yeah, it's one of those moves. It's a very, very fancy move. I just don't know if it's 760 level. Like, I feel like if you have a person that plays that, that's just not nice. So I'm gonna go up with my queen. But that's how you need to visualize. The queen doesn't have to move to get involved in the game, but I'm gonna move it because I'm 770 or whatever. But that's the difference, maybe, right? That is the difference. That's why you're here. That's why you're here to learn. Bishop f8. I love that move. That's such a good move. That's an excellent move. This move is like, yeah, you're not gonna checkmate me. That's a great move. Love that move. On the one hand, we can trade because we're up. On the other hand, we can say, no, I don't want to trade because I'm losing one of my attacking pieces. To be honest with you, both is completely reasonable. And third of all, we can actually protect the bishop and say, if you take me, I will be replacing you with my queen. Queen e3 is a very high level move. Very high level. Like 27, 29 level. But I feel like the bishop would be forced to move here. It feels more human to play bishop f4. It's just like, no, I don't want to trade. Because we're also thinking about space, right? Your bishop, it's so spacious. When you have such activity, you don't just want to trade off all your pieces, because the truth is you want to trade when you're up, but we're up a pawn. So you trade and then you blunder. Boom. Now you're losing. So, okay, bishop g7. Again, if you're still obsessed with bringing the queen over, you can continue to try, but it's going to be tough. So what I would do here at this point is I would probably bring my rooks. Like, again, we've seen that a lot. When in doubt, bring the rooks to the middle. If you want to break, like you want to crack the position open and do this, you're more than welcome. I would probably move a rook, though, before you do that. Like, just this is just so useful. I can't stress enough how useful it is to just bring rooks to open or semi-open files, because you just have backup. You have permanent backup. Don't forget about the rooks. And the thing is that, like, I don't know what that move does. That just seems like a very quickly played move. I don't think we're trying to run the king to the middle. So I've completed the rook journey, and now we're gonna have to make decisions. We can't just dilly-dally. We have everything. We have all the pieces situated right around the middle of the board. There's only so many useless pawn moves that I can make, right? At some point, one of us is gonna have to do something. By the way, when the king moved over, I could have snuck in. I could have actually, it's a move that kind of is like a little bit of a blind spot, right? I could have snuck into h7 and messed around, but so f5. Gate is open, gate is open. I've prepared enough, so now it's time to break in the middle, right? We're doing a pawn break. So we have good support, queen, bishop, rook, guard the pawn, and my rook on the e file is also open right now. So I have more pieces playing. I have 6 pieces. Both bishops, knight, queen, 2 rooks that are playing. My opponent has not moved 2 pieces. We're on move 16. They haven't moved 2 of their pieces, which means if my pieces are coordinated, if they're not just standing around on the edges of the board, I've done a better job at getting my pieces involved in the game, which is that's how it should be. That means you did good. You should be proud of yourself. Congrats, right? So we're happy. Yeah. What more to say? You should be satisfied with the development of your position. Knight b4. Okay. Well, don't blunder anything. Yeah, you basically, just as long as you don't hang your queen in one move, you can play here, here, here. A lot of safe moves. Obviously, this is sort of a backup plan. you have a very advanced move, which is queen a3, pinning the knight to the king. That's an amazing move, but I think it's more human to like play queen b3 or queen d2. So I'm going to play queen d2, attacking the knight. But queen a3 is a it's also super rare to have a king on f8. That doesn't happen. The king generally castles and stays in the corner. I think my opponent might have just seen my clock also and is trying to play a little bit faster, which I do not recommend trying to beat me on time. But now also these two pieces work together. And anytime you have a piece protecting a king like that, offering an exchange is always a pretty decent idea. Obviously, the mistake made in this game by my opponent was playing a slightly dubious opening. And ultimately stopping your own natural development, because you brought the queen out. You kind of played a Scandinavian defense with queen takes d5, but it wasn't... Oh no, they forgot that I was attacking their knight. That's a one mover. Yeah, you saw bishop takes. And in general, you should be very careful wandering down here. You can always kind of get locked in, so just be careful that I can't shut the door on you. But this is a problem, because now it's check, and you lose the bishop. So you got a pawn, but you lost the bishop and the knight. And you already did not have a lot of pieces out, right? You had all your pieces on the back rank over there. So now it's going to get a lot harder. It's going to get a lot harder, because now you're in check, and you're going to be losing these pieces. Yeah, and the worst part, because you went king f8, I now have this diagonal. That's mate. Not only do you lose two pieces, you might get mated. That's tough to see, but because I've been moving my queen so much, I am actively thinking about, what if I go all the way to the other side of the board? And in general, always be looking at your long-range pieces. What is their eyesight? Like, how far can they see? How much of the board do they see? If you have a diagonal attacking piece... Queen h8. It's a very pretty checkmate, you know, up close and personal with the king. Right? But yeah, you're kind of stuffed here. It's a tough position. I mean, like I said, queen takes d5. So in positions where the e-pawn takes the d-pawn, right? Something like this. And then the queen comes out. Like a Scandinavian, if you're going to go passive, you have to develop actively. You cannot give up tempo in the opening and be passive. You understand what I mean? If you're already going to be giving up some tempo with your queen, you have to develop aggressively and actively, right? Going to the side is much more common, but the thing is, once you've already committed a pawn, you really should take back in the center with a pawn. Because as early as move, 5, you're going to struggle to develop your pieces. And actually, I did not play a great move. Knight e4, the bishop slides back, there is nothing. The computer thinks that knight e4, it actually thinks it's the best move. But for the purposes of 700 chess, I wouldn't do this. Like I said, I would play rook e1, I would connect the queen and the rook, and then at some point when you're ready, crack it forward. But this is a very common tactical blunder, and it happens. But my opponent defended quite well. They just... King f8 was a little bit suspicious, and then the blunder. It happens. It happens. You're going to lose material sometimes, and it's okay. Okay. I'm playing somebody named God of the Beat next. I've got the black pieces. E4. So we haven't had an e4, I guess, in a while. I'm going to play e5. Now Lucy and I are deciding what to get for dinner. So knight f3. This is very common. Knight c6. This is the most universal opening. Bishop c4. Yeah, in general, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, first of all, is known as the Italian. And I've talked about putting two pawns in the center if possible. It's not. So I always say knights before bishops, right? The Italian is the one exception where if you play like that, you could get yourself in trouble. Like if you play knights before bishops, okay, and this is exactly why. So knight g5 is something known as it's trying to get the fried liver. It's punishing you for blocking your own queen, and now there are tactics on f7, right? And that's very tough to block. So on the one hand, if you've never seen this before, you would lose knight takes f7, get forked, and lose your rook. On the other hand, if you have seen this before, the best move here is d5, which attacks the center. The second best move, in my opinion, is bishop c5, known as the Traxler, the counterattack, and it leads to some pretty wild positions. I'm not going to act like I'm well prepared in the Traxler. I'm going to act like I've never seen this before, and I'm going to play d5, right? And so you should learn the Traxler. If you're going to play in king's pawn positions, I mean, I can't give you a separate Traxler masterclass now, but you have to know what you're doing. And playing in the center is generally a good idea. Now, the best move here is to move the knight, believe it or not. We're getting to the level where you actually have to have some openings memorized. You can't just play here. This is a very dangerous weapon for white, which is one of the reasons it's actually better to develop the bishop first, and then the knight, and then castle. We didn't. We actually are getting ourselves in a little bit of trouble here. So the move I like to play here is the move knight to a5. Knight to a5 is a very decent move. It attacks the bishop, and it kind of slows down the initiative, right? They give us a check, and now let's say we play not c6, which is the best move, but just bishop d7. We don't know the opening. We stop the check, and now we just take with the queen, and we're pawn down. We're pawn down, but we might take this pawn back. We go, oh, I can just take, or take with the queen, or take with the knight, right? Okay, let's take with the knight. I've never seen this before. I'm gonna take with the knight. Okay, cool. So now what? We're gonna have a wild game here. Knight c3. So do I take? If I get taken, I can just take back, right? So what have I not done yet? I haven't gotten developed. You know, bishop c5, bishop b4, bishop e7. I don't have to take. I could, but I don't need to. So I'm going to play bishop e7. I haven't gotten developed. My bishop is still bad, and my king's in the middle. You know? By the way, if at any point you guys have been thinking about attacking this knight, totally fine. Love it. Hate that where that knight is right now. I want to kick it out. I'm just choosing to attack it with one of my pieces I haven't developed. All right, so big debate. Thai food, pizza. What do we want for dinner? And also trying to kick that knight out. Knight to e4. And now I'm going to castle, okay? I know I can take, and really what I'm trying to teach you throughout this series is, besides how to like be an awesome chess player, is like, if you don't need to take, don't. You don't always have to take everything. Like, okay, now we obviously have to take. I hope they play queen f3. Queen f3 is a really nice move. It guards the knight, but it also, we're getting to the advanced level. This is the most advanced game of the series so far because we got ourselves into a very, very, very difficult opening. And if you don't know what you're doing in that opening, and I will show you, let's move our queen out of the way, like queen e6. The best move is knight a5 and not taking back with the knight. We'll analyze after. You're more than welcome to skip. But d3. Okay, what have we learned in this series? When in doubt, let's bring some rooks. And if you're wondering why I'm bringing the a-rook, it's because where else are you going to put the a-rook? Like if I bring this here, why is my rook going to be stuck behind these pawns, right? So when in doubt, just bring the rook to the middle. We have no danger to our position, so we might as well develop a rook. And it's a very balanced game. This game is such a free-for-all. It's such a free-for-all. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. Can be anything. Anything. It's a crazy, crazy tough position. Okay, queen f3. Is that attacking anything? Believe it or not, that's actually protected by our knight. Admittedly, the knight kind of sucks. Like, I would love the knight back into the middle of the board. We can also take a little bit of space with our pawns. This is a common idea. Like, we can move bishop or whatever, or get a little bit more activity with the bishop. We can also take some space with pawns. We can also bring our knight back to the middle. Queen trade, I don't hate it. I wouldn't like spend your entire existence in chess trying to trade pieces, but I don't hate that either. So all those moves are okay. F5 is quite reasonable. I think yeah, like we could bring our knight to the middle again. Let's also not forget though that if we move the knight, what happens? Have you been paying attention? Continuity. Right? So the knight guarded the pawn, but not if we, right? Then we're going to have to be ready to lose this pawn and maybe some more. Not easy. Not an easy position at all. It's probably very, very balanced. which is one of the reasons it's worth learning the Traxler, the fried liver, like these openings, because it really helps you. You don't just play some openings and you just some random moves in the beginning of the game and hopefully not lose. So rook d7, bishop d6 is completely fine. Again, I wouldn't trade a bishop for a knight for no reason. We also can go danger levels, knight d4, which attacks some stuff, but play simple chess. So the pawn is attacked, the pawn is protected. It's a perfect example of not thinking about where the opponent is going to go. Knight takes c7 would have been possible. At this point, I kind of just want to kick the knight out. We had a similar situation over there. Like, if a piece is sort of bothering you, there is absolutely nothing wrong with just kicking it out. You can play a6. I don't blame you at all. And yeah, now again taking some space with pawns if you can. And on the one hand, this is actually a case of taking a bishop into a knight being not bad, because again, what happens? Damage structure. Doubled isolated A pawns, and now we split B and C apart. So that's actually not the world's worst trade. Again, knight d4, not really a thing because queen takes b7, but let's see if they do it. Let's see if they do it. We forgot about this. Okay, they take. Can take with pawn or rook. I'm gonna take with rook. Do they see this? How fast will my opponent play this move? Queen takes b7, just free pawn, and maybe a second one. They missed it. And now I go, oh my god, I can move my pawn out of the way. Oh my god, I can't believe that they didn't take my b7 pawn. It's crazy. h4. Can't I take? This just seems like a move, like 3.5 seconds on this is not okay. You cannot be just... It's only queens and rooks on the board now, so you gotta look around, right? You gotta look around, you gotta see what I can take. Like, I see that this has vision this way and this way. I see that the rook has vision over here. It's, you know, queen sees this pawn, by the way. Very lucky it's protected, because if I get in over there, I'm gonna beat up everybody. Queen g3 is not a bad move. Attacks my rook and my pawn. All right, like this. So, oh, look at that. Now I can go here. That protects both. Now, this is a pin, right? Pawn and queen here. So a very interesting move will be f4. It's a very dangerous move because you've already lost one of the pawns near your king. It also kind of doesn't exactly work tactically because f4, if I take, even though I lose my queen, I actually win a queen as well. So rook e4. There's no threat, right? But maybe you want to double your rooks. That's what my opponent's doing. Here's a fantastic example of continuity. You go, oh, what a stupid move. I have f5. But the rook used to guard the pawn. So you've now accidentally allowed rook e5, which you didn't. You just stopped rook e5. But you're like, oh, f5, f4, boom, boom, boom. And, oh, and they missed it. They forgot the rook no longer protects, right? So again, we're going to trade rooks because we're up material. And now you can also offer a queen trade. It's not a good idea to trade queens here for white because not only are you a pawn down, because I damaged your structure like this, I doubled your pawns. It would have been different if I doubled them like this because at least you have some pawns in the middle. You shouldn't trade queens, so this is good. I'm playing for a small trick here with my long-range piece. Very similar diagonal to last game, by the way. Long diagonal, queen diagonal. But this also opens. I think they see it. I think my opponent is responsible. They're going to try to move the rook. Yeah, they do. And now, again, it's a case where I don't need to take necessarily. I can go all the way here, because that was my idea anyway, to go on that diagonal. I don't think it's the best move. I actually think it's better to attack like this. But now there might be chaos. So here's a very good example of how you can lose a chess game instantly. You have an idea to take pawns, right? Queen takes pawn also takes a pawn and guards c2. So a very good way to lose here would be takes, and forget about the queen taking you, and then you resign. That would be very tragic. Okay, so I can take 1, 2, 3, not this, because it is now protected as a result. You see this? As a result of the pawn moving. That's so hard to see. Queen c2 I like, because it's a move that creates maximum danger, right? It's a good move. It leads here to potentially a disaster. Potentially a disaster. Yes, awesome move. So it's mate. And if I play rook up to f7, they just check me and we repeat moves. So this is a moment you might freak out and you're like, oh my God, they're attacking everything in my position. Whoa. So you're like, oh, what do? You can check and actually get back and defend mate. You can also just defend mate from a distance. That also is a possibility, right? You can also try to repeat moves. What I'm going to do is I am going to check, force the king here, and give another check. So I've survived the checkmate portion of this attack. Now I can take, maybe push. I'm going to take. It's probably not even, I don't know, maybe not the best move, right? This is hanging. So it's a crazy position. I can't give the check anymore. It's like, oh my God, what am I doing, right? If you move the queen too far, you get checkmated. You're like, oh my God. Okay, queen f6. As long as I don't get mated. What do I do, right? How am I going to win this, right? No time on the clock. First, what I would do is I would make sure that you can trade some pieces and you don't just repeat moves. You also, be nice to just kind of get the king off the back rank, right? h6, king h7. You have still this if you need it, if the queen moves somewhere, right? But you've defended, you kind of survived. Oh my God, very scary though. Could have been a disaster. Could have been a disaster. You could have lost the game. Oh my God, it would have been so bad. Queen b3. Okay, so it's check. Let's slide out of the way. And opponent is potentially setting themselves up for disaster because they just took their eye off the ball. It's a very deceiving position. White has no attack. White has no attack. The only attack that white has is if we hang mate. So they protect it. Very good. Now, queen a1 check and taking this actually works. Like we actually can go give this check and we actually can win this pawn because there's no mate. For a very brief moment, there's no mate. But now there is a threat on our rook. There's also back rank problems, right? So it's kind of funny. Like in this position, you might have to do something completely absurd, like just cocoon. Like make sure your king just cannot get mated, right? Super, and like, defensive. But as long as you give him that breathing room is going to be everything. So something like h6 is super useful. But there's still an amazing move here by white, which is rook c6. I mean, if they see that, that's so impressive. To take and see this pin is, yeah, okay. That was maybe a little bit too much. Now, our queen can start picking up pawns as well, right? Doesn't really matter. Seeing f2 is kind of difficult. Let's take on a3. f2 is like across the board. But we're still up, and you always have to keep an eye on your own checks. Queen d6 wins the game for us because we're going to pick up that rook. We're up 2 pawns. It's a scary 2 pawns, but we're up 2 pawns. Sometimes you got to play some defense. By the way, if you're an 800, you might have lost this game like 10 moves ago. So I'm trying to like, right? I'm trying to teach y'all how to like chill out a little bit. Yeah. Tough. Chess is hard, right? Now I don't have this. So what do? Let's go all the way back. It's crazy. Look at this. I mean, I don't know. We could, and oh, they blundered check. They blundered this check. Always look for checks. Queen f4. And the rook is hit. And yeah, again, just like we've been talking about, trading queens is good here, but sometimes there's also various back rank things. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna immediately go for the queen trade. We're not even gonna. An opponent shouldn't even, they should move like queen e4 or something. That was such a tough game. Such a tough game. Get the queen off. Try to hunt the pawns with the rook. You might not be so successful because the rook, you're actually gonna need some help. You can't just win this game with your rook. It's impossible. So you're gonna need the help of the king and the other pawns. Don't stalemate, by the way. Still never too late. Like, look, this is almost a stalemate. Luckily, they can play f4, right? So we got a little bit lucky. Yeah, I mean, f3, right? f3, f2. And here, don't freak out. For example, after king g2, what you do here is you just bring the king. And again, don't stalemate. Make sure that if you bring the king to help, king can always move, right? So something like this, get the pawn, easiest thing to do. Now, that was an awesome game. I mean, what can you say? The reason why early on I did not recommend taking with the knight is because that plays directly into the fried liver. And if you don't know what the fried liver is, like you've never heard of this in your life, after this video, whatever, pause, go watch a fried liver video because these positions are so dangerous. I would not recommend this to anybody. And yes, as you move up to 700-800, this is some of the stuff that you're gonna have to memorize. You can't just play chess like, I'm gonna move my knights before my bishops. No, sometimes even as early as move 3 or 4, there's crazy stuff. There's insane stuff that you could just get blown off the board. And a sign of a good chess player is not losing the same way like 5 times. Okay? It's just, right? Like, sign of a good player is you have to learn from your mistakes. And this is one of the rare cases. It's better to develop the bishop first because then you have castles. Right? And bishop c5, in this case, is actually a very reasonable move. In this case, you don't have bishop c5. You do, if you would like to learn fried liver and Traxler, which are 2 of the most incredible dynamic opening weapons that exist in e4, e5 positions. Hopefully we get some more of them. Yeah, you know what to do. You gotta, that's a little bit, you know, I'm pointing you in the right direction. I can't feed you everything, but I can certainly try. So we've played e4 and d4. Let's play another e4 game. We've seen the French, this. We've seen a lot of different stuff. Maybe we'll see e5. I don't know. Okay, so now there's a lot of openings here. There's gambits, which you can kind of aggressively play. So knight to f3, knight c6, and actually I'm gonna do that. I'm going to play bishop c4, and maybe we'll get a fried liver. Oh wow. Should I do it? And then are they going to play the Traxler against me? Let's play knight g5. Now we are ourselves, and oh, we have a Traxler. So the crazy thing about this is that, and again, I almost played this with black in the last game, but now you're learning back to back. The point here is that if white goes and ventures in and tries to, you know, get some material here, bishop takes f2 is a crazy, crazy, crazy weapon. And knight takes f7, bishop takes f2, we can get our king hunted out into the open. So it's generally considered that taking with the bishop, if they play the Traxler, is the best thing to do. Why? Because you're just going to win a pawn. They don't get to castle anymore, and then you will just come back. So you'll play bishop like back to b3, and black has lost the right to castle and has a king in the center of the board. The Traxler normally, if you allow it, and again, this is one of the most curious openings in chess, if you play like this, there is bishop takes f2. And that is just a lunatic line where sometimes your king ends up like out here, and it's just too scary. It's too scary, and I don't want us to go through that, right? So I'm gonna try to play still standard normal moves in an opening that's extremely crazy, right? So this is a real opening, and it's actually quite insane. And I'm, again, because I'm playing my subscribers, right? Because I'm playing against my subscribers, they are playing some of these openings that I recommend. So definitely makes sense. So let's continue development. Knight c3. Okay. I guess we can come back like this. We're actually under quite a bit of pressure. I mean, bishop g4, like it's not a super pleasant position. And yeah, there you go. So I'm gonna play h3. And they take. Yeah, see, I don't know about takes here. Probably I would have just kept the pressure because it's so hard for me. You know, I can't get my bishop here. I can't block this pin. So now I'm gonna take with the queen. We saw in first video, taking with the pawn is terrible. You open up your king. Now, I have to be aware of how my queen can be attacked. I have all of these different pieces ready to attack my queen. Queen e8. So that move doesn't strike me as a crazy move. By the way, knight d5 check is awful because when the knight takes, my queen is under attack. I might move my queen over and try to attack the g7 pawn. That doesn't look crazy. I also might just play d3 to get my bishop into the game. right? D3 seems like a relatively reasonable move as well. Like, I'm just trying to follow basic principles. You know, if I get attacked, I get attacked, right? It's up to my opponent. They're the one that played the aggressive opening. So, you know, I'm a 980. Okay, knight attacks queen, so queen can go back to where it came from. Do not walk into an attack. And queen g3 also pretty reasonable. Yeah, I'm gonna go queen g3. Now, folks, this looks like you blunder a fork. You don't, because the knight covers. But you have to see that, right? You have to see constantly how they can attack you as well. So g5, very aggressive move, very aggressive move. Now knight d5 is still terrible, because even though we're trading knights, I'm allowing knight to e2. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna get my pieces out. Now here, there's a great move. Knight h5 is a very annoying move. Continuing with the theme of attacking my king, I just kind of want to trade some pieces. Like, if I get bishop off the board, knight off the board, I'm not in any more danger. So this is another kind of strategy of when you're getting attacked. You try to trade some stuff. So I'm going to take this. I'm not even going to hesitate. I'm just going to take it. And now I'm even going to try to trade some more. So I'm going to try to trade these knights. These knights, right? A move that I've been trying to play for a while. Try to trade. So now I've traded some pieces. I'm still not totally out of the woods. And bishop takes b2 is the thing, right? So I guess I can go back to where I was, but I can also danger level it. Doesn't seem stupid, right? So you attack my bishop, I attack your bishop. Ha! You take me, I take you. All right, we're gonna have some sort of trade here. Yeah, great move. Awesome move. That's called a desperado. If you know that you're going to lose a piece, you might as well lose it for something. So I have to take with the rook. I'm not gonna lose my queen. Bishop is hanging. They could also take my rook first before they take my bishop. Probably the best move is to not bring my king out into the open, right? I should probably take. And yeah, now I'm going to take with my pawn. And there is this, but there's another move in this position that looks good but isn't. It's this move. And that move is not good because I would have taken the a7 pawn. But now, folks, when in doubt, the handy-dandy rook. And that could be an issue, because that is the only open file on the entire... And they guard it immediately. Wow. Good job by my opponent. So how am I going to get to this king? You know? How am I going to get to the king? I want my queen somewhere there, infiltrating. How do I get... Pawn trade? Maneuver my queen somewhere? You know, queen e2, queen c4. Yeah, maybe queen c4, queen c7, right? I want my queen to infiltrate. It's a very, very complicated game right now. And it's going to be a queen endgame. Like last game, we had a queen and rook endgame, right? Rook f8. So rook f8. Do I take? You don't have to take. I will, because here I have a fork. But I'm not going to play it. All right, we want to get to the weak pawns, right? Look at that. That is... I mean, I don't think a 1000 plays that fork. I think a 1000 probably plays queen b5, which was always the plan. But queen f2 is an amazing move. And so now in a queen endgame where it's equal material, it's going to come down to two things. Number one, who can get the pawns that are the most important? In this case, this is the most important pawn because I can promote. So black has an e-pawn, which can promote. If I can get in and take pawns and promote my pawn, I'm obviously in winning shape. Black is trying to defend, right? So maybe queen a5, trying to go to d8 or take a7. Good move here is b6, guarding everything. Or no, queen d7 hangs this pawn. And the second thing is your king safety. So if black sacks a pawn but finds a way to land me in perpetual check, like if you just draw the game, that's okay. It's okay to draw. But again, it's the most important pawns. Black has this e-pawn. That e-pawn is going to be very annoying. And if you start pushing that e-pawn, I'm gonna be in some serious trouble. So, okay, that's not the e-pawn, right? So we're not pushing a pawn there. But black probably has everything quite well defended, honestly. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is just queen and 6 versus queen and 6. To be honest, I don't know. So queen d3. And we're going to have to play a little bit longer. Ah! Let me respond to wife. So, ladies and gentlemen, queen takes g6 is a very risky move, but I'm going to play it. And it's very risky because if you go for a pawn endgame, a protected pass pawn for your opponent might lose you the game. So you have to bring your king, right? You have to bring your king. It has to be as active as possible. And the thing about pawn endgames is that the person to run out of moves first is going to lose. What does that mean? So that means, like, for example, right? I'm going to slow play and try to coordinate my pieces in such a fashion that my opponent has to give way to me first. There's something called Zugzwang, which is a German term. It means you're in a stalemate, and any move you make is something you're surrendering to your opponent. Now, in pawn endgames like this, yes, moving one square is the way to go usually. You have to move one square at a time. Again, unless you're kicking a king out. Like you play g4, king e4 together. Now, I'm thinking here to play c4. Why c4? Because I think it's good if my pawns are together. Right? a4 also, I don't think a4 is actually that bad. I think a4 is also very reasonable. a3 is also okay. It's very tough to... But you don't want to play a move like b4. Because b4 kills your mobility on 2 pawns. You now no longer can move at all. Like a b4 is very rarely going to be the best move. So I'm going to play a3. I'm just going to wait. What does my opponent want? Just one square. Who's going to run out of moves first? Who has to give way to who first? Had I not brought my king, my opponent would have just walked in and taken my pawns, right? So now we have this weird moment. Okay, e4 is a huge commitment because now you're not defended by the pawn. It's the king. The king is forced to be the guard. So if I go king d4 here, black plays king f4, total chaos, right? Like, I don't know what the heck is going on. But we can make our opponent run out of moves. g4, king to e5, and now watch this, c4. And black, because black got the king tied down to the pawn, black ran out of moves. So now the king is gonna have to move. It's gonna have to go back. Black's out of moves. Black has no moves. I waited for black to overextend just slightly. And now if a5 this, and you know what the craziest thing about this endgame is? If it was my move and I had to give way, black is winning. That's how close the margin of error is. a5, I go a4, black is out of moves. That's so hard to calculate, but that's what king and pawn endgames are all about. It's like you can't overextend your pawns. You can't get your pawns frozen. Active king is so important, but this pawn should not have been pushed. It actually was a golden statue, and you shouldn't touch it. Because if I start doing all this exotic stuff around it and I walk my king, that pawn's always going to be coming down the middle. But when you tie your king like this to the defense, that's it. Now none of your pawns can move. In fact, the middle pawn very, very rarely wants to be ahead of others. So you'll notice that over here, I didn't put my middle pawn forward because I would have totally frozen everything. I might have been okay before this move, but the reason why it was okay here is because the king was being forced backwards. Like we're forcing the king to an uncomfortable position, right? So a5 is played, here's a4, and now that's it. And now I'm gonna win this pawn, and because I have the 2 pawns in the middle, what I'm gonna do next is just like this. I'm gonna use my king to break through, and I'm gonna be the one with the golden statue remaining. So, or, we can now come in this way. But then we might get met at the door, and then we have no moves. It's kind of funny. You go king f5, you're like, oh. Like, look, I go king f5. If they go king f7, I have no moves. Because you're not going to sack the pawn. Why would you do that? That doesn't, to give another passer, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, damn, that didn't work. Okay, let's go back. Let's go for this other strategy, right? Oops. So you got to be, right? That's something called opposition. They oppose you. They don't let you in, right? So now you go king d4. Now we're going for the other one. And now we're winning. c5. Gonna break through. And we're totally fine on the other side of the board. Totally okay. And we're gonna win. That's how we're gonna win this one. How are you guys doing? You guys still here? An hour of watching? These are long episodes, but hopefully they're good. It's quiet. Opponent resigns. Yeah. I mean, honestly, there was not a huge amount more that I can analyze during that game. Like that, I did everything. Again, we had a fried liver Traxler, and if I haven't convinced you yet to study these completely insane lines, we're at the level now where you're gonna have to. And I could have walked through that minefield, and I could have gotten destroyed. And maybe I will. And I'm trying to give my opponents opportunities throughout these games to kind of showcase their abilities. And I mean, Duck's name is Bennett, I think. So Bennett played like a super game. I mean, this was awesome. It was awesome. Like everything, like I tried to, negate the pressure by trading pieces. Like that is a high level concept. And then this beautiful tactic here in an endgame, a queen endgame, which more likely than not is a draw. This is a totally drawn endgame. Grandmasters would maybe play this out. Maybe white has some really advanced way of playing this for a win. I don't know, but black has a really good position. So let's hope the last game is as good as all the other games that we've seen so far. So Splashy is from India. I don't know if Splashy misspelled Zeus, but Splashy's a strong player. So C4. It's the English. We haven't seen this yet. I'm going to play E5 in the middle of the board. Right? E5. Knight C3. And now we can't put a pawn in the center, so we're gonna just develop knights, bishops, normal stuff. We haven't seen an English yet. Okay, yeah, this is very good. So now what do you do here? Right? Like what do you do? Our strategy, for the most part, has been taking, or defending our center. So in this case, our center is well protected, and we can either develop slightly passively or slightly more aggressive, right, to b4. We can also take and then put a pawn in the center, which is another thing that we've been doing. So you're kind of good with, you can also defend. Just again, if you play a little bit passively. Let's take, right? And let's put a second pawn in the center. So we have a situation here. We're supported with queen and knight, and that's sort of been my strategy. Like, if you can put a second pawn in the center, you should do it. So now we're going to have to develop a bishop. You can pin either knight. Personally, I'm a bit more of a fan of this one because we're closer to castling. So we are just going to play bishop b4 and play short castle. Right? By the way, king is open, but that's not really a scary thing. Okay, bishop d2, short castle. And we're actually in a very funny spot here. This is a moment where our opponent is a move away from castling, right? And it looks like we should just finish our development. But there's something here. It's not like winning or anything like that, but there's something here. It's the fact that we can delay their castling. We can delay their castling by forcing them to move the bishop that's guarding the king. We waited just for this moment. Yes, we can develop our light-scored bishop, but we're getting advanced. We're going to start getting to the level. You have to pose problems to your opponents. Problem is, I'm not going to let you castle. Also, I can take your pawn. So because you played in a slightly inaccurate way in the opening, I can already take your d-pawn. But I don't see that. I only had one idea. My idea was, I want to check you. I want to make it not so easy for you to castle. I want to make it so that you have to play defense here against my rook. How are you going to do that? It's going to be with your bishop. You don't want to move your king, right? So what are you going to do? That's so important. You go, they haven't castled yet. Can I delay that somehow? Some of you might have said, oh, you could have taken this knight too. Not really, because that doesn't actually stop them from castling, right? Okay, bishop e2. So when the king castles, the only thing that's going to be protecting the bishop, the queen and the knight, right? But the knight's not going to be guarding it because I'm going to take it. So in this position, queen e7. I mean, by the way, knight takes d4, but shh, queen e7. And my point is that if you castle, I'm going to take and take this. This is a very advanced technique, very advanced. But it's there, and it lands, and it lands. And now we take the bishop, we take the knight, we take this. And that's so small. It's the smallest of details. But, and by the way, if you could have taken the knight first, you could have taken the knight and then played like this. But then they would have been like, wait a minute, if I castle, that's not good. And now queen e2, and we are a piece up. So sometimes, if you just follow basic principles in the opening, good things can happen out of nowhere. If you get castled first, oftentimes, and the opponent is still a move or two away, that's when you get an opportunity to strike, right? And now rook e2. And we've had games before in the series where we've just been a clean piece up. So all we got to worry about now is simplifying, trading a rook, trading a bishop into a knight or whatever, and not blundering back ranked mate. So at some point, we're going to play h6. And all of this is only possible because we played d takes c4. If you had just played normal moves, it would have been also completely fine. You just wouldn't have won the game or gotten a winning position that fast. But yeah, so I'm just going to take. For example, right here, you might be in a spot where you're like, oh, Gotham told me to trade when I'm up. Yeah, but Gotham didn't tell you to hang mate in one. Right now, that's not a problem. So you're just, let's say you play bishop here, and you attack that pawn. Simple. And it's really hard in positions like this to actually create any sort of counterplay. When you're 1,000 and you're down a piece in a position with no queens, no rooks, how are you ever going to create counterplay? For example, like, I want to trade with you. It's just so hard. Like, as long as the other player doesn't hang mate, it's almost impossible because you just don't have the firepower. You're playing symmetrical pieces, rook, rook, knight, knight, bishop, bishop. You just can't beat me unless I drastically weaken my king, right? So there you go. Bishop takes and when in doubt, bring the rook. I want to trade rooks, right? When in doubt, bring the rook. It's been like a motto, right? It's been a motto of the whole series. So rook e8. And also I'll just play h6. But you don't need to play h6 if there's no rooks. The knight cannot deliver back rank mate. So this is actually a fun moment. Taking is just the auto move, and it's fine. But taking actually improves my opponent's position. It helps this isolated pawn, a pawn that has no neighbors, and is blocking everything, to transfer forward and actually attack my knight. And if you try to be fancy here, that's protected. So let's just go to the middle. Knight to e4, attacks the bishop. Can't be a bad move, it's protected. Might get trapped. f3 is a possibility in the future. But my next move is I'm going to bring my rook. That's my next move no matter what. So all right. Rook d8, rook e8. Man, it's tough to record for an hour. You can show your support by not watching my videos with ad block or buying a course. My courses are pretty sweet. So opening courses, boot camps. But if you're 68 minutes into this video and you're like, damn, I'm still here. Or if you're like, it's like your 6th time watching, that's also a thing. Just drank like 3-day-old water by accident, and it did not taste okay. That's what happens. My mind wanders. I was supposed to drink this. This is the water I brought for the recording of this episode. I absentmindedly grabbed my thermos and was like, wait a minute. Like, what? Okay, I can't take this, but I can offer a pawn trade. I can also play like a million moves. You want to still play this, a5, b5, c5, like literally doesn't matter. Knight c5 is fine to try to go knight d3. Pushing a pawn is fine. I want to get my rook in the game though. So a pawn break is pretty useful for that. Also, my king is not ever going to get back rank mated. So f6 is just a useful move. It's a good move. My opponent's best move here is actually to attack my knight, because my knight is guarding this pawn. Wow. Yeah, now I have to lose this pawn. So I played f6. I didn't think my opponent was going to do this. And now they are going to win a pawn. Very nice. Removing the guard. Oh, maybe they don't even realize. Oh, they don't realize. They're chasing me. Now I have a triple fork. So sometimes you give your opponent a little bit too much credit, but at the same time, sometimes your opponent makes you an accidental genius. So they make you triple fork them. I wouldn't have seen that move. Do I take e5 or b4? 50-50. I don't know. Maybe you're worried about, you're worried about that, so you take like this. I don't know. Now there will be an instructive moment if they take this pawn. It'll be the famous Bobby Fischer bishop trap. There will also be an instructive moment if they play rook e1. Tactics. So rook e1 and bishop takes a7. Rook e1 just looks good because you're like, oh, I'm pinning the knight. I'm so smart. Knight can't move, but it's you. Oh, that's not good. That's not a good move. You don't want to trade. I mean, they're kind of surrendered to the fact that they might lose the game, which I kind of understand. 2-on-3 situation. So in general, you're going to have to find some way. When in doubt, also put your rook on the enemy second rank. It's just the best space for the rook. It controls so much. And either in this episode, was it this episode? I think one of the earlier games of this episode, we had a bishop, light square bishop, that got defended and just stood powerfully. And that's what we're going to do right now. We have another situation where the bishop is just so strong that we're going to leave it there. And we have a 3-on-2, is what I meant. So when the pawns fall, we're going to have a c-pawn. That's a good move. I like that move. Now, the plan was to just go harass the pawns, but I'm going to set up something, right? So bishop, rook together. Now, anywhere our rook moves is going to be a check. And if we also attack the enemy rook, my opponent might play this and not realize I can block the attack on the bishop. Oh, well, there you go. So now I'm going to continue here. Rook a2, also a good move. Hits the rook and the pawn and is protected. So b5, yeah. And now, you can start trading off the pawn. You also could just sack, but like, you don't need to do this at all to get rook and 6, but just trade. Just trade the pawn. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to win the battle of the game on the queen side. So a6, c6, whatever. And it actually does kind of help that we created the back rank thing for the king, because it's never too late to hang mate. Really, rook d1, rook d8. It's good that our king has some breathing room. So we never need to... Do you see why I am making this series? Do you understand now? Because of that. I'm in the mind of the player. Yeah, I've coached enough. So a b5 is yeah, and now we have this, and our king is always going to be safe among the pawns, and this game will be decided by the passed pawn on the queen side. That's how I'm going to win this game. We don't need to worry about this, although it's very tricky here, because if you take, you lose your bishop. But we have seen what we're about to see before. First of all, you could just push your pawns together. More often than not, pushing the most advanced pawn is better, because as long as it can be defended, it's a constant nuisance. And folks, when you have the back rank pawn, rook and pawn coordination with the king on the back rank like this, we've seen this either in episode 1 or earlier this episode, you're going to win the game like this. The pawn is going to defend the rook, and there's going to be a king in check, or a king pinned to the rook. If the king was on h2, we couldn't do this, but that's okay, because we would have decided the game with those pawns. Okay, now the easiest thing to do, 2 queens. Don't even hesitate. Make 2 queens. Because enough pawns like this, white wants to be stalemated. Queen takes g2 is the best move, but 2 queens. 2 queens, get out of the way. Make sure that white always has a legal move with the king or the pawns. 2 queens. And now you can start giving checks. When the king is in the open, no checks. I want you to just be, cutting the king off. Now you can give checks. Give checks. You never know. It might be checkmate. For example, with your pawn, but again, you have queens. So check. And now how can I check? Check, check, check. So let's go check. Has to be checks, otherwise you accidentally stalemate. And now check. Mate, look at that. Just gave some checks, poked around a little bit, and we ended up mating. Maybe you don't see queen e4, maybe you accidentally, you accidentally go here, and now it's like, okay, at some point you will deliver a mate, with 2 queens. So that is the easiest way to convert this game. Yeah, I mean, English or not English, at the end of the day, what did we do? We put out knights. And then our pawn was challenged in the middle. We didn't have to take, because we were actually defended. I decided to take. Sometimes it makes life a little easier to take. You don't have to worry about the stress of whatever in the opening. Not the Queen's Gambit, though. The Queen's Gambit is actually something we want to reinforce, because if you're taking a center pawn into a center pawn, it's actually okay, because now you're both left with 1 center pawn. But sometimes taking an off-center pawn, like in the Queen's Gambit, you give your opponent the opportunity to dominate the entire center of the board. And I just put a second pawn in the center because I could. If I couldn't do that, I wouldn't have done it. But at the same time, bishop here is fine. Although, remember, I've talked about getting your knights messed with. You can let your opponent wedge some pawns in the middle and start bothering your knights. Something that might happen. And then you may need to kind of come back, make sure you're safe, castle. And yeah, definitely the most instructive moment here is, oh, I'm not just going to develop. They haven't castled yet. So let me open up the position. Because when you have the luxury of being castled and your pieces are standing actively, notice that a player with white should very rarely have pieces like this. If you've noticed throughout this series, I've never put my bishops like that. I just haven't. I don't put my bishops so passive. Because what's going to happen is the game is going to happen and they're going to have to move again. You need to be more active with your bishops. Like, for example, bishop b4, counterpin me. Be a little bit more aggressive, right? Like, the bishop should, if anything, castle first. But that was the instructive thing. We lined up on the piece that was protecting the king, and we got it. And the rest of the game is history. Appreciate y'all very much, folks. Thanks for hanging out with me for an hour and 15 minutes. This is Chess Steps, whatever you want to call the series. Steps to your glory, success. And in the next episode, we're going to probably go up to about 12, 1300. As always, let me know your feedback. But I think everything is going quite smoothly. So I will see you in episode number 3.